We have about 15 minutes for some questions, but I would like to kick off with one for you. Because when I was looking at the topics for this presentation, I was struck by, we may be entering a time at the moment when we're moving from less regulation to more market forces sort of impacting the different systems, and they impact each of the topics that you talked about in different kinds of ways. Would you like to kind of comment on that? I mean, Puneet, starting with you, a lot of what you talked about is dependent on there being a big market in Europe. What happens if there's a policy change in Europe too?
So, you're not the only one who is talking about policy changes in Europe, especially after Brexit and all those things. Things are definitely evolving at every place, even in this country, as we all are aware of. But good news is that even if UK is out of the market, especially from the European Union, which they will because they have already voted it for, but European Union as such is reviving their 2020 policy, and they are coming up with a new policy where the policy targets are to reduce their carbon emissions by 40% from 1990 levels by year 2030 and by year 2060 by 50%. And the good thing about biomass is that this is the only energy resource so far that humankind is aware of which can provide base load. Solar cannot do that, wind energy cannot do that. Biomass as such is just like a coal power plant. If you need base load to taking care of electricity grid, biomass is the only resource that you have in your hand. Another good part of wood pellets is that it's the first energy resource that mankind ever used. It's a key component of human civilization. So we know almost everything when it comes to how to burn wood. Even a 6-year-old can burn the wood, if not the house. So already once the logistic is in place, we know how to grow wood. But the only problem is sustainability, that we should not start deforesting. But the good news as far as Georgia is concerned, and we are following our BMPs. Close to 90% of wood that is harvested in the state of Georgia is by following BMPs. Sustainability is not a problem. Policy uncertainty is not a problem to a very large extent, especially in the European Union, because the way they are evolving their policy, and they are very committed to climate change targets. We don't want to be a bad guy at the end of the century or whatever. So both these logistic point of view, the policy point of view, everything is same. The biggest problem is that this entire supply chain operates on subsidies from European Union. If somebody starts reducing subsidies, then wood pellet importer and exporter have to be very careful about that what is their future. But based on what policy they are going forward in terms of carbon reduction, I don't think so personally that they have any idea or any thinking, even thinking on those lines to reduce subsidy level, especially till year 2050, when they want to have 50% reduction from 1990 level. So for 20-30 years, I think markets are pretty sound.
Dennis, dairy industry.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because there's a perception, I think, that particularly in the dairy industry, that there's a lot of environmental regulations that have been a burden that have been laid upon the industry. At least that's the way the industry views it. And I think they're pleased in some way to see some relief of that perception anyway. I think, though, there is certainly a need for some regulatory aspects of that, but I'm very pleased to see the industries actually getting some recognition from corporate interest. I'll give you an example. We had the grass-fed exchange, the National Grass-Fed Exchange was hosted in Georgia just this past year, and actually gave a similar talk to them. And immediately afterwards, there were two corporate entities that came up to me after the event that represent several well-known brand names that were groups of these corporations were kind of gathering together to form their own carbon exchange program, cap and trade basic program. And it's very preliminary. It's, nothing formally has been announced yet, but there's some really exciting things that I think are going on the industry level, at the corporate level, that may have some role to play here to support some of what's going on for my guys on these dairies, or in our grass-fed beef operations as well. So I think there's some, some challenges, I think, of not having as much of a regulatory prowess to it, but I think we also are seeing some other alternatives there that are coming to bear as well that maybe we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Jill, insurance, FEMA.
So, well, I can think of two things. One, that with flood insurance, so the National Flood Insurance Program has been subsidizing coastal homeowners, property owners, for decades now. And so that people haven't been paying their true risk living in coastal regions. And because of things like Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, and now Hurricane Matthew, the program is just billions of dollars in debt. And so they're trying to make it so that people will start paying their true risk. However, when you think about communities like Sapelo Island that Nick spoke about earlier, sometimes we just assume that the people who are living in these coastal communities are very wealthy and have that disposable income to absorb the costs. And we don't think necessarily about what that could do to some of the marginalized communities living in our coastal zone, and how that could change the demographics of who's living in the coastal zone. And so that's one aspect. And then I think another with policy changes, Tybee Island, for example, only has 3,000 full-time residents. It's a very small community. And so some of the issues that they're going to be dealing with are going to cost a lot of money. And we've had a lot of federal support to come in with planning and research and grant funding coming into these communities to help them start planning. If that dries up, I think it'll be interesting to see how these local communities try to tackle the future with climate change and sea level rise.
And Kyle, gentrification, how does that?
That's the main word, gentrification. So you can imagine if you were a developer in Atlanta and you've gone out as far as you can and you're scaring all of us in Athens, the next logical place to look is in at all the infill development. So I think what makes urban streams interesting is it's sort of a pure externality. There's not technically a market for urban stream water in Proctor Creek the way there is milk or wood pellets or something like that. So regulation does play a heavy role there. There are development forces in play, foundation money is coming in, and the questions that are coming up is what is the equity of how that money is spent, and what is the equity for the community that already lives there. So in the basin, there's something like a 90% rate of renters, so very, very low home ownership rates. And there's concern that if gentrification comes in, that all the rent will go up. So it's a delicate dance between how do you change that through policies like rent control or policies like that at the local government level versus the environmental stick like the consent decree associated with sewer overflows by the city. I think that's part of what we're negotiating through, question mark? Maybe?
Okay, questions from the audience?
That was
Oh.
Well, for Kyle, I mean, Gwinnett County loves to build subdivisions around lakes, and so I'm just wondering, is there a market there in the land for using water as sort of an attractive force for development? I think, what is the new belt line around it, the water things? I mean, is that a commercial opportunity perhaps?
Absolutely, and that's something people are actively exploring. Todd alluded to the Beltline, so this is a greenway proposal for the city of Atlanta that would cut right through the Proctor Creek Basin, and a lot of the nonprofits are interested in recreational opportunities, green space, things like that. But again, what's the equity of those outcomes? Who's going to win? Is it someone who lives outside the basin that hasn't borne the brunt of 30, 40, 50 years of living in a place where sewer overflows into their basement? That doesn't seem very fair, does it? But how that plays out, I think only time will tell, is how those forces of gentrification and equity play in the urban environment. So I'll happily not answer your question.
Questions?
Is rainwater harvesting something that is important, will be important in Atlanta for that project?
That's something that's moving through local government. Currently, the city of Atlanta has a very active Department of Watershed Protection, but their stormwater ordinances aren't, for instance, maybe as strong as some in other local governments like Athens has a relatively strong stormwater ordinance. There are ordinances for new developments to hold 1 inch of rainwater on site through whatever means that is. It can be permeable surfaces like lawns or green roofs, or it could be through storage in a detention basin, rainwater harvesting. And that's for new development. What happens with old development is the trick in Proctor Creek is you have this basin that was full of apartment complexes. And when everyone moved out of those apartment complexes because of mold and rent changes and environmental assaults, are they subject to new development stormwater ordinances? I don't know. I don't know how the city's going to write or not write policies based on that. But that's an excellent point.
For Dennis, I know your focus was on carbon capture in regenerative soils, but are you also, it seems logical that the improved quality of the soil would improve the pasture, which would improve the milk supply for the dairy farmers. Are you tracking that as well? Is there a parallel line between improved production and carbon capture?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we would see an increase in milk production in the southeast as a result of that over time, and I think we probably will over time. We've had the great financial crisis followed by a very, very major upheaval in the agricultural industry with the renewable fuel standards driving up the cost of grain, and that now has crashed back down to what is probably where it would have been to begin with. And as a result, there has been a huge turnover in the dairy industry. About 3 years ago, everything was the sky's the limit, and growth was going gangbusters everywhere, and now producers are losing probably a few $1,000s on every truckload of milk that leaves their farm at the moment. So it really is a time where I think over a longer period of time we'll be able to see that, but just because of a variety of macroeconomic decisions, if you will, have come home to roost and many of our dairymen are kind of bearing that burden at the moment. I think we will see that over time.
Question on
My question is to Dr. Dennis. I think you talked about adopting more the first or best dairy system to increase the milk products and less carbon sequestration. But have you thought about how I think the dairy industry is one of the biggest polluter and methane. There's a lot of methane emission coming from dairy, and if you see it, the total greenhouse gas emission contribution is about 10% for agriculture, and a significant amount is coming from the dairy industry. So in your study, did you include that one, like emission of methane, and also it may affect your water quality a lot. So did you take care of those things?
Yeah, great question. That was actually one of the first studies that we did, was to look at that in a more model setting. These sorts of things are very difficult to do in real in situ kind of experiments. Although there's some of that that's going on. Actually, some great work is going on at the University of Florida in that regard. To give you the snapshot version, as these pasture-based dairies were coming on board, we took a subset of those and actually did some life cycle analyses on them. And then we paired them with conventional confinement dairies and did life cycle analysis on them as well. And we looked at methane emissions and projections of those methane emissions, as well as complete energy usage and water usage, as well as nutrient runoff and nutrient losses off of those farms, okay? There's a Bellflower, was a graduate student that we had, wrote a paper on this. If you're interested, I can send you a copy of it. The long and the short of it is that these were pasture-based dairies that were just getting started, so the data we were collecting on them, honestly, was probably unfair to them. And the dairies that we were comparing them to were arguably some of the best run dairies certainly in the Southeast, maybe even in the U.S. And even still, when you looked at the methane emissions per unit of milk that was produced, it was virtually identical, okay? And then if you looked at nutrient runoff, because you're capturing a lot less, there's a lot less sediment coming off of these farms because it's permanent pasture. There's a lot less nitrogen leaching because it's got really deep root systems, because they're perennial species. Those root systems go 3 meters deep or more. So you're capturing a lot more of those nutrients in a variety of ways. So, and these were immature systems. I think if we were to repeat that analysis now with that technology or that systems that they have now, much more refined. I think we find that is reduced pretty dramatically. And there's still more to do yet. Some of the things that they're doing in terms of methane reductions in the livestock industry are just now really gaining steam. I think we're really going to see some great improvements there.
Could be.
Oh, sorry.
We have one last burning. One.
Okay. I could ask you, it's for Puneet. Puneet, did you include any, in your analysis, did you include mostly carbon from the wood harvested? Did you include any soil carbon in it, or is it primarily the feedstock?
So basically, if you see the literature on reforested lands, especially log lolly pine, the species which is most common in Georgia, 7 million acres of log lolly pine. It doesn't, and under reforestation cases, soil carbon doesn't change quite a bit actually. So you want to, if you want to be more academically and all those things, you can include soil carbon, but that is not going to impact your carbon calculation because at the end of the day, it is same. So typically, I don't take it because this is unnecessary nuisance in that sense. But yeah, things change completely if you are doing afforestation. Then I have also done papers on afforestation. Then I will definitely account for soil carbon, especially all the land which is coming from haylands, cotton land, peanut land into forestry. So soil carbon starts increasing quite a bit. Then I have accounted for soil carbon, but not these results. They are log lolly pine, deforestation cases, which is most of the Georgia basically.
So primarily wood.
Okay, thank you panel one more time.